Hey guys, so I just wrapped up a new project called Identity, and it was a super simple video, like really basic. I just had the idea for the video that I wanted to be super raw and just I didn't want it to be slick at all. I didn't want to it to be like impressive because I wanted just the message to shine through. But there's a technique to the video that I used, and it created sort of a wiggle effect on the type, and I've had a lot of people ask me how I did this effect on the type. So I thought I'd go through the whole process of making this whole look, and it's really simple and easy, and I think you guys are gonna love it. So let's jump into it. Alright, so the only element you're gonna need for this is this texture here from called Watery Texture. And that's from my Paint It Black free texture pack on my website. I'll put the link below and you can go download that. And also I'm getting over a cold right now and I have this terrible hacking cough. So I'm gonna try to edit all those out, but if you hear weird edits, that's probably me just going into some sort of dry hacking fit. So yeah, bear with me. So I'm gonna try and set this up the same way that I set up my my project that I did for Identity. So we're gonna use the same settings so that it's gonna be like exactly the same project and the same look. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go to New Composition, and it's gonna be 1920 by 1080 square pixels, 23.976 frames per second. I have the duration at 30 seconds long here. That's more than we need, but whatever. I'll call this main comp, and we'll go into that. First thing we'll do is create a solid, and this is going to be our background, and I'm going to change the color to be sort of like a purplish color. Click OK, and now we're going to add our type to this, and I'm just going to use the very first line of type that I used in the video, and it's really tiny right now. It's crazy tiny. That's before Christ is the very first line. And this font that I'm using, I use 3 fonts in the video, and I'll put the link to those below. But this one I'm using right now is called Amatic, and it's a really nice looking font. And let's see here. I'm going to set my resolution to 1/3, or maybe half. I'm just trying to make it look okay on this screen here. That looks fine there. We're going to go ahead and pre-compose this type here. So by hitting Command-Shift-C, that will pre-compose it. And that's fine. You could also go up to Layer and go to Pre-Compose. Let's go into our type by double-clicking on it. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the transparency so we can see our type better. And we'll go ahead and make this type sort of a tannish color. Man, I'm really fighting off a cough here. That's terrible. What am I doing? Oh, I'm forgetting what I'm doing because I'm trying not to cough. Okay, let's go ahead and make this sort of a tan color. That looks pretty good there. And let's go ahead and bring in, we're not going to bring in our watery texture. We're actually first going to pre-compose it, so we'll just drag that texture into this new comp window here. I'm actually going to pop a cough drop here, so bear with me. And I'm sorry if this sounds annoying, but it'll help me not just be disgusting during this tutorial. So we're going to drag the water texture into its own comp here under that button, and now we have it pre-comp there. Let's go back into our type layer here and drag our watery texture over our type here. And right now we don't see much, but if I turn on the transparency, it's because our texture is black right now. So we're gonna open up that texture, and we can turn on the transparency right now so we can see it. We're actually gonna duplicate this maybe 3 times here. So by hitting Command D, I duplicated the layer there, and I'm gonna rotate it around just so it's not identical and move it a little bit. Basically, I'm doing this so that because our watery texture was a little bit too see-through in its original state, so this is going to help we're going to be using this layer, this watery texture layer, as the texture for our type, so we need it to be a little bit more visible. So let's go back to our layer here, and we can turn on transparency, or maybe not for now. There are a few ways that we can knock out the watery texture out of the type. One of the ways to do it, and I use this way a lot, is by selecting the text and going to let's see, or actually it would be the other way around here. So I would take the watery texture and then I would alpha matte the text there, and then if I turn on my transparency, you can see that the type is getting knocked out of the watery texture, and that looks really nice there. But there's actually a better way that I do this when I have a lot of layers. Say I have a lot of layers of type below here, because if I had to do it the other way, I'd have to sort of do an alpha matte for all of these. But the way that I'm going to do it is actually by putting the watery texture above, going to the mode, and if we go down all the way to stencil alpha, and then if it's working here, and there we go. So it's using the alpha of the very top layer, and it's going to be knocking out the type of all the layers below it. And you'll also notice that it's actually using the color of the type, which is pretty cool in this case. And like I was saying before, if I had more type layers below here, it would be using the watery texture on all of these. So I wouldn't have to like duplicate my watery texture and do multiple alpha mattes. But I'm going to go ahead and delete these other type layers for now. And if I go back into my main comp, then this is actually looking really close, pretty similar to how it looked in the video there. It was a very simple setup for this video. But the thing that added life to this video was sort of the little jittery, wiggly nature to the type. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that part, which is going to add all the life to this shot here. Let's go to new layer. Let's go to adjustment layer. And we're going to go to distort, displacement map. And I'm going to change it from red to luminance. I'm going to set that to 2, and I'm going to change this from green to luminance. And the way the displacement maps work is they draw displacement from another layer in your composition. So what we're going to do is we're going to create that other layer to use as the displacement for our type here. So I'm going to go up and go to new solid. Color does not matter. And we're going to pre-compose this by hitting Command-Shift-C. And we'll call this displacement layer. And we're going to move all attributes in. Now, if I double click on that, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a fractal noise. And this was sort of the easiest way I found to sort of create the jittery text. There are other ways you could do it. I could have created shape layers out of the type and then added a wiggle parameter to it. But the thing that I wanted for this video was I wanted all my type to remain live so that I could change it as much as I wanted throughout the process, because I kept editing the script the whole time I was working on it, so I needed my type to be live. So this is how we do it here. I'm going to go to noise and go to fractal noise and apply that to our layer. And I have my settings written down here. So I'm just going to set all these to what they need to be. It needs to be dynamic. It needs to be spline. It needs to be 132 for the contrast, 11 for the brightness. Let's see here. I put 50 for the scale, so it would be smaller little jitters. And I think that's about it for those settings. And the way we animate this, you could animate this the evolution here, but this would actually create far too smooth of a jitter. I wanted every frame to be different than the next one, completely different. I didn't want it to look like it was sort of undulating like this fractal noise is here. So the way that I did that is if you open evolution options and you go to random seed, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hold Alt or Option key, depending on what type of computer you're on, and I'm going to click on the stopwatch for the random seed, and that is going to open our expression panel here. And what I'm going to write is I'm going to write time, and then I'm going to do the times sign 24. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a completely new random seed every frame. And so this will make it so it doesn't look like it's undulating, and it looks like a completely different fractal noise every frame. If I go back into the main comp and I go to I can turn off my displacement layer for now. If I go to my adjustment layer and whoops, we'll name that. I'm going to hit enter on it just so we can name it. I'm notoriously bad at naming things, so I'm just doing this for the tutorial. Normally it would just be like layer 500 adjustment layer number 73, but it's not a good way to work. Should get better at that. So I'm going to go ahead and change the displacement map layer, and I'm going to set it to be the displacement layer. So now I'm going to zoom into my type here. I'll bump up the resolution, and we'll do a little render to see what's going on. And you'll see that every frame, it's sort of displacing the type just a little bit. And it's only a little bit because I have the values set to only be 2 and 2 for the luminance. So if we play this back, you'll see that it's jittering. All the type is jittering. And if I wanted to make it jitter more, I could really bump it up just so we can see how this is working with the displacement and how it's being used from the noise. If I bump it way up, you'll maybe see what's going on is that the noise is being applied to our type, and it's actually being applied to any layer below the type. If I just made a new solid and I made it whatever color, put it below the displacement layer and move it down, you'll see that it's being applied to that as well. So this is something to keep in mind. The way that we're doing this is that everything below this displacement layer is going to get displaced. I'll delete that layer I created. I'll set this back to 2 and 2. And one of the things I don't like right now about our displacement is I don't like how it's doing it every single frame. It's making it look a little bit too anxious and a little bit neurotic, the text here. So the way that I solve that is by actually cutting the frame rate of our noise layer here. So if we go into that layer here, I'm going to close up this layer here, and I'm actually going to pre-compose this. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-C, and I'll move all attributes. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to apply a posterized time effect here. And what this is going to do is it's going to let us cut down the frame rate so we can experiment with different frame rates for this. I actually ended up on 10 for my project. But if I would have done 12, it would mean that it's going to hold for 2 frames. So it's 1, 2, new frame, 1, new frame, hold, new frame. So this is cutting down the amount of times that the noise is going to be changing. But I actually ended up putting it down to 10. So it's almost every 2, but every now and then it will be every 3rd one because the way that I have this. And this just creates a little bit more natural feel to it. It's not quite as uniform, and I kind of like that. So if I go back to our main comp here, and by the way, I'm clicking through up here. A lot of times this is the easiest way to get through your pre-comps up here. So just in case you didn't know that. And so if I go ahead and do a RAM preview right now, the amount of displacement that it's doing, it will only be every other frame that it's being displaced, or more or less, like I was saying with the 10 frames per second. So if I go ahead and play this now, that's the look right there. That was the whole look of this video that I did. And I knew that it was going to be such a simple video, but I needed to have something dynamic in the video, something that was gonna make it feel alive for these shots that were just 5 seconds of type and no movement, or no animation. So this little bit of displacement really added just a cool vibe to the video. It made it feel handmade, and that was often that's what I'm going for in my videos. I like making things feel tactile, like they were made by a real person rather than a machine. I think the last thing that I'll go over is adding the little speckles and the dust that you might have seen in the video. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go ahead and add a solid to our composition, and I'll call this dust. The color does not matter. We're going to go up and go to noise, fractal noise. And this whole technique of adding this dust came from a guy that's called VFX Bro, and I'll put a link to his site below. He has some pretty cool tutorials. And this is just a really quick and easy way to add some dust or noise to your images. So I'm going to go through these settings pretty quickly here. Our contrast is at 450, and these are the settings that he used. I'm just using them because they worked really well. Brightness at 250, the scale at 50, and I think that's it. And I'm actually going to be using the same technique that I used to animate the random seed for this. And we're going to go down to the random seed again, and we're going to hold Option or Alt and click on, whoopsie, not on the opacity. I want the random seed there. There we go. So we're going to do the same thing we did before, time times 24. And we're using 24 because that's our frame rate, so that every frame it will be a new one. That's how that expression is working. So if I play it now, it's gonna be hard to see because it's really subtle. I don't know if I won't even try to play it that way because it's really hard to see. But I want my dust particles to be sort of that tan color that my type was. So I'm gonna create a new solid and make it sort of a tan color. I'm going to put that below the dust, and I'm going to make a Luma inverted matte, which means that it's going to use the color of the pale orange solid, and it's going to knock out those little black dust particles. It's not going to knock out, it's going to do the opposite of whatever knocking it out would be. I'm not sure what that word is. So Luma inverted matte, and now, oh, I can see one already. There he is, a little dust guy. So if I do a little RAM preview right now, we should see some dust particles here. All right, there we go. So there you have it. We have our little dust particles now. And I think in my video I ended up pre-composing these two layers together. Let's call it dust. And duplicating them, Command D, and then shifting them over a little bit so that I had multiple layers of this dust, so that just so that there was a lot more of it. I liked the way it was looking, so I wanted to bump it up, and this was the easiest way to do that. So there we go. All right, so we're like 95% of the way done here. The last and final thing that I did to create the look of the video, I'm not going to go through this completely because it's just stupid easy and you can do it for yourself, but I'll show you kind of how that works. Is I had a paper texture, and this is one I got from iStock from like 5 years ago or something, so I don't even have a link to that right now. You can just find a random paper texture online. I think I ended up pre-composing this. I think that I just took the color out of it. And then basically all I did was overlay this paper on top of all of our other layers so that it gave it a little bit of texture to it. I think I had the opacity at like really low, maybe something like 25 or whatever. And then all I did for the paper was I actually I had it change every 3 frames. So if I zoom in here and I go 1, 2, so I had it be 3 frames. Whoopsie, duplicated the wrong layer. If I duplicate that layer, I moved it down, and then I just took this and then I repositioned it a little bit, and then duplicated that one, and then rotated and moved that thing there, duplicate it again, move and rotate, so that I have sort of a flickering paper texture throughout my video here. And if I just RAM preview those ones right there, you will see the final look of this video, and it's really subtle, just like the wiggle type is and the dust is. It just adds one more layer of subtle movement to the piece, and there you go. That's the whole look of this video. Super simple. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.